The mining colony's warning systems flashed red across every screen in the control room. Blue Song's four hands moved quickly over the holographic controls, his crystalline body reflecting the emergency lights. The small colony of Astra beings had never expected trouble this far out in space. They were peaceful miners, working on the edge of known space, gathering rare minerals that their species needed for sustenance. Elder Blue Song called out Crystal Hum, the youngest operator in the room. The long-range scanners show multiple ships entering our system. They're not sending any friendly signals. Blue Song floated closer to the main screen, his transparent body clouding with worry. A natural reaction among the Astra. The ships on the screen were arranged in an attack formation. Anyone with even basic knowledge of space combat would recognize it. But the Astra weren't warriors. They had never needed to be. How many? Blue Song asked, his voice resonating like wind through crystal. 27 large vessels, Elder. And they matched the description of the Dark Swarm fleet. The control room fell silent. Everyone had heard stories of the Dark Swarm, the terror fleet that appeared from nowhere, stripped colonies bare, and disappeared with all resources and survivors. No one who encountered them ever returned to tell their tale. The only reason anyone knew about them was because of the evidence they left behind. Empty, broken colonies. "We must contact the Galactic Council," said Crystal Hum, his young voice shaking. Blue Song's body dimmed slightly, their equivalent of shaking their head. The Council's nearest fleet is 3 weeks away at maximum speed. The Dark Swarm will be here in less than 2 days. The colony held 5,000 Astra souls, 5,000 of his people who had trusted him to lead them safely. Blue Song looked around the control room, seeing the fear in his people's clouding bodies. They were miners, scientists, families. They had no weapons, no defense systems beyond basic shields meant to protect against asteroids. Then he remembered something: the forbidden frequency. "There is one option," Blue Song said slowly, "but the Council has forbidden contact with them." "With who, Elder?" Crystal Hum moved closer, hope returning some clarity to his form. "The Deathworlders. The humans." Gasps echoed through the crystal walls. Every young Astra learned about humans in their history lessons, the strange beings from a planet that should have killed them. A species that evolved on a world with crushing gravity, deadly predators, and extreme temperature changes. Their bodies were dense with muscle and bone, their minds sharp with survival instincts, and their technology. Their technology was built to endure everything their hellish world had thrown at them. The Galactic Council had voted to isolate them centuries ago. Too dangerous, they said, too unpredictable, too willing to fight. The humans had accepted the decision with what they called a shrug, and simply continued building their empire in their assigned sector of space. But they had left behind one thing: an emergency frequency, a way to call for help if anyone ever truly needed them. Blue Song moved to the communications array. His fingers hesitated over the controls. Using this frequency would mean breaking the highest laws of the Council. But as he looked at the screen showing the approaching Dark Swarm fleet, he knew there was no choice. "Elder," Crystal Hum whispered, "the stories say humans are violent and unpredictable. They might be as dangerous as the Dark Swarm." Blue Song's body glowed with determination. "The difference, young one, is the humans fight to protect. The Dark Swarm fight to destroy. Sometimes we must trust in the dangerous to save us from the evil." His fingers moved over the controls, inputting the frequency that no one had used in centuries. The emergency beacon activated, sending a powerful signal into the void of space. The message was simple, sent in the human language of English that all Astra learned as part of their history studies. "To any human ships, this is the Astra mining colony in Sector 7B9. We are under attack by a hostile fleet. We have no weapons. We have children. Please help us. Please." The message shot out faster than light, racing through the darkness between stars. All they could do now was wait, and hope that the most feared species in the galaxy would choose to answer their call. Crystal Hum moved to the window, looking up at the stars. "Do you think they'll come, Elder?" Blue Song joined him at the window. "The stories say that humans never abandon a cry for help. Now we will see if the stories are true." Above them, the stars continued to shine, unknowing of the drama unfolding beneath them. Somewhere out there, their message was speeding through space, searching for the only beings in the galaxy that the Dark Swarm had never dared to attack. The Deathworlders, the humans, their last hope. Admiral Marcus stood on the bridge of the Earth Fleet's flagship, Thunder, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of holographic displays. The massive ship, nearly 2 miles long, cruised through hyperspace with its escort fleet of 15 vessels. They were returning from a routine patrol of human space when the signal came through. "Admiral," called out Lieutenant Reed from the communication station. "We're picking up a distress signal. It's using the emergency frequency, sir." Marcus straightened his back. The emergency frequency hadn't been used in over 200 years, not since the Galactic Council had decided that humanity was too dangerous to interact with. They'd left the frequency as a final lifeline, knowing that someday someone might need the very thing that made humans so feared: their ability to fight. "Play it," Marcus ordered, his voice deep and calm. The message echoed through the bridge, the alien voice speaking careful English, begging for help. The crew fell silent as they listened to the desperation in those words. "Sir," the ship's eye, Atlas, appeared as a blue hologram. "The signal originates from an Astra mining colony. Scans indicate they are being approached by 27 warships. Based on their formation and energy signatures, they match known Dark Swarm patterns." Marcus's jaw tightened. Everyone had heard of the Dark Swarm, pirates and raiders who preyed on peaceful species. They'd never dared enter human space, but their reputation for cruelty was well known. "Time to intercept if we alter course?" Marcus asked. 38 hours at maximum safe speed," Atlas replied. "However, the Dark Swarm will reach the colony in 47 hours. We have a narrow window, Admiral." Lieutenant Reed looked up from her station. "Sir, the Galactic Council's laws clearly forbid us from entering that sector. We'd be breaking at least 6 major treaties." Marcus walked to the front viewport, watching the streaks of hyperspace light pass by. He thought about the fear in that alien voice, about the children mentioned in the message. He thought about how humanity had accepted their isolation, understanding the galaxy's fear of them. But they had never accepted the idea of standing by while the innocent suffered. "Atlas," he said quietly, "what happens to Astra colonies when the Dark Swarm finds them?" The AI's hologram flickered. "Based on historical data, sir, total destruction. No survivors." Marcus turned to face his crew. Every eye on the bridge was fixed on him. They all knew what was at stake. Not just the lives of the colonists, but possibly humanity's standing in the galaxy. Breaking the treaties could lead to even stricter isolation, maybe even sanctions. "Send a message to Earth Command," Marcus ordered. "Inform them that we received an emergency signal and are responding as per Article 7 of the Human Emergency Response Protocol." A small smile crossed Lieutenant Reed's face. Article 7 was an old Earth law, predating their contact with aliens. Any ship captain who ignores a distress signal is guilty of failing to render assistance under maritime law. "Atlas, plot an intercept course. Push the engines to maximum. Lieutenant Reed, send a message to the colony. Tell them," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "tell them help is coming." "Sir," Atlas's hologram flickered with calculations. "Even at maximum speed, we have only a 9% chance of arriving before the Dark Swarm begins their attack." Marcus smiled, and there was something in that smile that reminded everyone on the bridge why humanity had earned their fearsome reputation. "Then we'll just have to be quick about the rescue, won't we?" "All hands," his voice echoed through the ship's communications, "battle stations. We're about to remind the galaxy why you don't hunt the innocent in our universe." The massive engines of the Thunder roared to life, pushing the ship faster through hyperspace. Behind it, 15 other human warships followed, their crews preparing for battle. They had trained all their lives for this, carrying the hope that someday someone would need protectors more than they feared humanity's strength. In the command chair, Marcus watched as his crew worked with practiced efficiency. They had been called monsters, dangers, deathworlders. But now, they would show the galaxy the truth about humanity, that the same strength that made them dangerous also made them the best possible allies. "Hold on," he whispered to the distant colony. "The monsters are coming to save you." The Dark Swarm fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts, their black ships blocking out the stars above the colony. Blue Song watched from the underground command center as the first shots lit up the morning sky, tearing through the colony's weak shields as if they were made of paper. "Everyone is in the shelters," Crystal Hum reported, his crystalline form dimming with fear. "All 5,000 colonists are below ground level." The underground chambers had been built to protect against solar radiation and meteor strikes, not warships. But they were better than nothing. Blue Song watched the main screen as the first Dark Swarm landing craft touched down near the main mining facilities. "They're not destroying everything," noticed one of the operators. "They're being careful with the equipment." Blue Song's form clouded with understanding. "Because they want our mining machinery. They don't just destroy. They steal what they can use." The first images of the Dark Swarm troops came through the security cameras. They moved like oil across water, their black armor making them look like walking shadows. Each one carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. The Astra had always thought of themselves as tall, but these creatures towered over their normal height by at least 2 feet. "Elder," Crystal Hum's voice shook, "we received a response from the humans before the Dark Swarm arrived. They're coming. Should we try to hold out?" Blue Song watched as the Dark Swarm methodically began searching the colony's buildings. Their movements were practiced, efficient. They'd done this many times before. "We have no choice but to hold out," he said. "But we must be smart. Atlas, seal all data cores. Activate the emergency deletion protocols." The colony's maintenance AI responded with a soft chime. "Data cores sealed, Elder. All mining records in colonial databases are now locked behind quantum encryption." The Dark Swarm had reached the main administration building. Through the cameras, Blue Song could see them placing small devices on walls and doors. Seconds later, those devices pulsed with energy, and the locks melted away. "They're going to find us," whispered one of the younger operators, her crystal form almost transparent with fear. "Yes," Blue Song agreed, "but they won't find us easily, and they won't find what they're looking for." The colonists had spent the last 2 days preparing. They'd hidden their most valuable mining data, scattered their food supplies across multiple storage rooms, and set up false leads that would take time to investigate, time they desperately needed. A loud boom echoed through the underground chambers. The Dark Swarm had found one of the main entrance points to the underground complex. "All security doors, close and lock," Blue Song ordered. "Activate the emergency maze protocol." The underground complex had been built with a clever design feature. In emergencies, the internal walls could move, turning the straight corridors into a complex maze. It wouldn't stop the Dark Swarm forever, but it would slow them down. "Elder," Crystal Hum called out, "they're broadcasting a message." The message played through the colony's speakers, the voice deep and artificial sounding. "Attention Astra Colony. Your resources are now property of the Dark Swarm. Surrender and provide access to your data cores, and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and we will ensure your suffering serves as a lesson to others." Blue Song's crystal form glowed with a fierce light. "Send them our response." Crystal Hum looked uncertain. "What response?" "Elder, send them nothing. Let them waste time waiting for an answer that will never come. Every minute they spend waiting is another minute closer to our rescue." Through the cameras, they watched as the Dark Swarm forces grew frustrated with the silence. They began using heavier weapons on the doors, But each sealed door they melted through only led them to more corridors, more choices, more delays. In the shelter areas, 5,000 Astra huddled together, their crystal bodies glowing softly in the darkness. They could hear the sounds of the dark swarm above them, searching, breaking, destroying. But they held on to hope, the hope carried in the message they'd received. Hold on. The Deathworlders are coming. Bluesong looked at the countdown timer he'd started when they received the humans' response. 36 hours until their estimated arrival. They just had to survive until then. Keep watching the stars, he told his people. Our saviors are coming, and may the Dark Swarm learn what it means to hurt those under human protection. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace on the dark side of the colony's moon, their engines cold and silent. Admiral Marcus stood on the Thunder's bridge, watching the tactical display show 23 Dark Swarm ships in orbit around the colony. 4 had landed on the surface. Status report, Marcus ordered quietly. They haven't detected us yet, Lieutenant Reed reported. Their sensors are focused on the colony. They're still trying to break into the underground complex. Atlas's hologram appeared, showing a detailed scan of the situation. The colony's defenders have been clever. They've turned their underground complex into a maze. The Dark Swarm have only managed to reach the outer sections. Marcus nodded, a grim smile on his face. Smart colonists. They've bought us the time we needed. Atlas, what's the status of our new toys? The gravity pulse weapons are charged, Admiral. All ships report ready. The gravity pulse weapons were humanity's newest innovation. The Galactic Council had banned them, calling them too dangerous. They hadn't wanted the Deathworlders to have weapons that could manipulate the very force that had made their home world so deadly. Send the signal to all ships, Marcus ordered. Operation Thunderstrike begins in 3 minutes. Remember, we want prisoners. The galaxy needs to know what happened here. The human fleet moved silently through space, spreading out in an attack formation that would have seemed suicidal to most species. 15 ships against 23 larger vessels. But humans had learned long ago that size wasn't everything. Sir, Reed called out, the Dark Swarm are broadcasting to the colony again. They're threatening to start executing prisoners if they don't get access to the data cores. Marcus's face hardened. Move up the timeline. Begin now. The human fleet accelerated as one, their engines lighting up the darkness. The Dark Swarm sensors finally detected them, but it was already too late. Target their engines and weapons, Marcus commanded. Show them what happens when you threaten the innocent. The Thunder's gravity pulse weapon fired first. A beam of invisible force struck the nearest Dark Swarm ship, crushing its engine section like a tin can. The massive ship spun helplessly, its crew experiencing crushing gravity levels that their bodies had never evolved to handle. Dark Swarm fleet is responding, Atlas reported. They appear confused by our attack pattern. Of course they were confused. No sane species would split their fleet into small attack groups, each ship charging directly at a superior enemy vessel. But humans had learned warfare on a world where predators attacked in packs, where smaller hunters could bring down larger prey. They're firing, Reed announced. The Dark Swarm ships launched their energy weapons, filling space with deadly beams. But human ships were built differently. Their hulls, designed to withstand the crushing pressures of Earth's gravity, shrugged off hits that would have vaporized other species' vessels. Return fire, Marcus ordered. All ships execute attack pattern Delta. The human fleet moved like a pack of wolves, each ship supporting the others. Where the Dark Swarm expected them to retreat after taking damage, they pressed forward. Where they expected the humans to break formation under fire, they held together. Sir, Atlas reported, the enemy is attempting to regroup. Their commander appears to be realizing we're not a normal opponent. Marcus watched as his ships tore through the Dark Swarm formation. The gravity pulse weapons were doing their work, crushing engines, weapons, and power systems. The Dark Swarm's technological advantage meant nothing against weapons designed by beings who had evolved under crushing gravity. Message from the colony, Reed called out. The Dark Swarm ground forces are retreating to their ships. They're running from us, sir. Not today, Marcus said firmly. Send to all ships. Block their escape. I want those ground forces captured. The galaxy needs to see what these creatures really are. The battle had lasted less than 15 minutes, and already half the Dark Swarm fleet was disabled or destroyed. Their remaining ships were trying to retreat, but found themselves trapped by the very force that had shaped humanity's evolution, gravity itself. Send a message to the Dark Swarm commander, Marcus ordered. Tell them, this is what happens when you prey on the innocent. Surrender now, or learn why the galaxy fears the Deathworlders. Blue Song and the colony's leadership watched in amazement through their few remaining external cameras as the battle unfolded above their world. The human ships moved in ways that defied conventional space combat wisdom, taking hits that should have destroyed them, pushing forward when any sane species would retreat. Their ships are damaged, Crystal Hum observed, watching the Thunder take another direct hit. But they're not stopping. How can they keep fighting with such damage? Because, Blue Song replied softly, they evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. Everything about them is built to endure. On the Thunder's bridge, Admiral Marcus stood calmly as his ship shuddered under another impact. Warning lights flashed across multiple systems, but he knew his ship could take it. They had built their vessels like they built everything else, to survive whatever the universe threw at them. Port side armor is down to 40%. Atlas reported. 2 decks are exposed to space. Emergency force fields are holding. Crew status. Marcus asked, watching as another Dark Swarm ship succumbed to the gravity weapons. 3 injured, no casualties, Reed reported. Damage control teams are already repairing the breaches. They say they've done harder repairs during training. Sir, the Dark Swarm commander, Lord Hunter, watched from his flagship with growing horror as his fleet was systematically torn apart by ships that should have been destroyed 3 times over. His species had ruled the dark spaces between stars through superior technology and tactical doctrine. But these humans ignored everything they knew about warfare. My lord, his second reported, the human vessels are still advancing. Their hulls are heavily damaged, but their weapons remain at full power. They're not retreating. Why aren't they retreating? Because they're insane, Lord Hunter hissed. No species fights like this. No one advances into superior firepower. No one. His words cut off as his flagship shuddered. The humans had fired another gravity pulse, and he felt his own body growing heavy as artificial gravity crushed down on his bridge. In the colony below, the Dark Swarm ground forces were experiencing their own revelation about human nature. They had tried to return to their landing ships, only to find them crushed by invisible forces, their hulls crumpled like dying insects. Look, Crystal Hum pointed at one of the camera feeds. The humans are landing their own troops now. The human Marines emerged from their dropships wearing powered armor that made them even larger than the Dark Swarm. Where the raiders had moved like shadows, the humans moved like thunderstorms, each step leaving imprints in the metal deck plating. Surrender. The human Marine commander's voice boomed through external speakers. You have 10 seconds to comply. The Dark Swarm troops, for the first time in their history, dropped their weapons. They had never encountered a force that could not be broken, could not be scared, could not be defeated through superior technology. On the Thunder's bridge, Marcus received the report of the ground forces' surrender with satisfaction. Status of the enemy fleet. 17 ships disabled. Atlas reported. 6 attempting to retreat. No ships remain combat effective. Marcus opened a channel to all vessels, friend and foe alike. This is Admiral Marcus of the Human Third Fleet. To all Dark Swarm ships, your ground forces have surrendered. Your fleet is in ruins. This is your final chance. Surrender now, or we will show you why our homeworld is called a death world. Blue Song watched the remaining Darksworn ships power down their weapons. In just 30 minutes, the most feared raiders in known space had been completely defeated by the species that the galaxy had tried to isolate. I understand now, he said quietly to Crystal Hum. The Council feared them because they are strong. But they never understood. The humans are strong because their world taught them to protect themselves. And now, they protect others. Above the colony, the human fleet took up defensive positions, their damaged hulls gleaming in the starlight. They had arrived as saviors and proven themselves to be not just warriors, but guardians. The Deathworlders had shown the galaxy that being dangerous and being noble were not mutually exclusive. Lord Hunter of the Darkswarm stood on his flagship's bridge, watching as his mighty fleet drifted powerless in space. The human gravity weapons had turned his once proud armada into floating wreckage. But he still had one card to play, one final move that had always worked before. Open a channel to the human flagship, he ordered, his black armor gleaming under the emergency lights. Admiral Marcus appeared on the main screen, his weathered face showing no emotion. Behind him, the human bridge crews worked calmly despite the battle damage visible around them. You fight well, human, Lord Hunter began, using his most diplomatic tone. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement. We have wealth beyond. Stop, Marcus cut him off. We're not interested in bribes. Surrender your ships and prepare to be boarded. Lord Hunter's red eyes narrowed. You don't understand. The Darkswarm have resources across 50 star systems. We could offer you 50 systems you've stolen from others. Marcus interrupted again. Lieutenant Reed, how many colonies have the Darkswarm raided in the past year? 23 confirmed attacks. Sir, Reed reported. No survivors found at any of them. The human admiral's face hardened. You see, Lord Hunter, we've been watching you for a long time. We stayed in our assigned sector of space, respecting the Council's wishes. But we never stopped monitoring what happened beyond our borders. On the colony below, Blue Song and his people had emerged from their underground shelters. Human Marines in powered armor stood guard as medical teams treated the few injuries from the siege. The colonists watched the exchange between the two commanders on public channels, their crystal bodies glowing with interest. You can't do this, Lord Hunter snarled, his diplomatic mask falling away. We are the Darkswarm. We take what we want. You're nothing but bullies, Marcus said calmly. You prey on those who can't fight back. But you made a mistake today. You attacked someone who asked us for help. The Thunder's massive form moved closer to the Darkswarm flagship, its damaged hull somehow making it look even more threatening. Like a warrior wearing battle scars with pride. One last chance, Marcus offered. Surrender now, and you'll face justice for your crimes. Resist, and we'll show you what happens when you push Deathworlders too far. Lord Hunter slammed his fist on his command console. We are the supreme power in the dark spaces. We will not bow to lesser beings who should have died on their brutal world. A small smile crossed Marcus's face. You still don't understand. We didn't survive our world. We mastered it. Atlas, execute final warning. The human fleet's gravity weapons powered up again, but this time they worked in reverse. Instead of crushing, they nullified the artificial gravity on every Darksworn ship. For most species, this would be an inconvenience, but the Darkswarm, evolved in low-gravity environments, found themselves floating helplessly. Fun fact about humans, Marcus said as he watched the Darkswarm crews flail in zero gravity. We evolved to handle everything from 0 to 3 times Earth standard. Your bodies, on the other hand, are already showing signs of stress. In about 10 minutes, you'll start experiencing severe disorientation. In 20, organ failure begins. You wouldn't, Lord Hunter gasped, trying to grab onto something solid. The Council forbids such weapons. The Council forbids a lot of things, Marcus replied, including helping peaceful colonies under attack. So tell me, Lord Hunter, Do you really want to bet your life that we always follow the rules? Through the video feed, Lord Hunter could see the determination in the human's eyes. He saw no fear, no hesitation, no doubt. He saw what his species had never understood, that the most dangerous beings in the galaxy were not those who loved violence, but those who had learned to use their strength to protect others. We surrender, Lord Hunter said finally. Full and unconditional surrender. Marcus nodded once. Wise choice. Atlas, restore their gravity. Marine teams, prepare for boarding. Let's show the galaxy what happens when raiders meet protectors. Bluesong watched as human ships moved to secure the Dark Swarm fleet. They did it, he said softly. They actually did it. Crystal Hum nodded beside him. Yes, Elder. But I think we all learned something today. The galaxy feared the human strength, but perhaps we should have feared what would happen without it. 3 months after the Battle of the Astra Colony, the Galactic Council chambers were packed with representatives from 100 species. The massive circular room hummed with excited conversation as, for the first time in 2 centuries, a human delegation stood at the speaker's podium. Admiral Marcus wore his formal uniform, the battle damage to his ship's hull now displayed proudly on the Thunder service record behind him. Beside him stood Bluesong, his crystal form glowing with steady confidence. Members of the council, Bluesong began. 3 months ago, my colony faced extinction at the hands of the Dark Swarm. We had a choice. Follow your rules and die, or call upon those you had labeled too dangerous to contact. We chose to live. The chamber grew quiet. On the main display, footage from the battle played silently. Human ships charging forward despite devastating damage. Marines in powered armor protecting colonists. Medical teams treating the injured of all species. The humans didn't just save us, Bluesong continued. They showed us what true strength means. Their ships were damaged but never stopped. Their crews were injured but kept fighting. Not for glory, not for power, but to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Admiral Marcus stepped forward. For 200 years, we respected your wishes. We stayed in our sector, built our colonies, and watched as raiders like the Dark Swarm preyed on peaceful species. We watched because you asked us to. But when someone finally called for help, we answered. The council leader, a tall being of pure energy, spoke up. The treaties were clear, Admiral. Your actions, while heroic, violated multiple laws. Laws. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Let me tell you about laws. On Earth, we have an ancient law of the sea. Any captain who ignores a distress signal is guilty of failing to render assistance. It's been part of our code since before we reached the stars. Because strength isn't just about having power, it's about how you use it. Bluesong activated a new display, showing the Dark Swarm prison ships now under human guard. The Dark Swarm's leaders have confessed to attacking 57 colonies in the past decade. They chose their targets carefully, always peaceful species, always those who couldn't fight back. They assumed no one would come to help. But someone did come, Marcus added. And now we're here to propose a new arrangement. The chamber buzzed with interest. On the upper levels, representatives from a dozen mining colonies watched intently. They had all heard about how one distress call had brought humanity's finest to the rescue. We don't want to rule, Marcus explained. We don't want to conquer. But we're offering something the galaxy desperately needs: protection. Any peaceful colony that wants human protection can request it. We'll respond to any distress call, defend against any aggressor, and ensure that what happened to those 57 colonies never happens again. And why should we trust you with such power? The council leader asked. Bluesong's form glowed brighter. Because they already have the power. They've always had it. But instead of using it to conquer, they use it to protect. I've seen human children playing with our younglings, sharing Earth stories. I've seen their engineers helping us improve our defenses, asking nothing in return. They're not monsters. They're guardians. The council chambers erupted in discussion. On the public channels across the galaxy, billions watched as history was made. The footage from the battle had already spread everywhere. Humans charging into combat to protect strangers, risking their lives for aliens they'd never met. We call them Deepworlders, Bluesong concluded, but perhaps we should call them what they truly are, the protectors we always needed but were too afraid to trust. The vote that followed was not even close. The old treaties were revised, allowing human ships to respond to any distress call. Within a year, hundreds of colonies would request human protection. The raiders and pirates who had plagued the galaxy's peaceful species found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't intimidate or outfight. As Marcus and Bluesong left the council chambers, the Admiral smiled. "You know what," he said, "back on Earth, there's an old saying. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Bluesong's crystal form sparkled. "Then it's fortunate that when we called, the good men of Earth chose to do something." Above them, the Thunder waited in orbit, its battle scars now a badge of honor. The ship that had answered a desperate call and changed the galaxy forever. The Deathworlders had finally found their true purpose, not to be feared, but to be the guardians of those who needed them most.
The Galactic Registry building stretched across 17 sectors of Nexus Prime, its crystalline spires reaching toward the violet sky like the desperate fingers of a drowning bureaucrat. For 3,000 years, it had stood as the ultimate testament to organized inefficiency, a monument to the universe's collective ability to turn simple tasks into exercises in cosmic futility. Administrator Zwaxthale of the Velothian Empire stood before the imposing entrance, his forearms clutching a briefcase that contained 47 forms, each requiring signatures from no fewer than 12 different departments. His species had conquered 7 star systems through sheer military precision, but here, faced with the registry's reception desk, he felt as helpless as a larvae in a solar flare. Next, the voice belonged to Registrar Click, a Zephyrian whose perpetual state of boredom had calcified into what could only be described as weaponized apathy. 6 eyes arranged in perfect symmetry across her elongated skull tracked Zwaxthale's approach with the enthusiasm typically reserved for watching paint dry in a vacuum. "I require processing for territorial expansion, permit 44B, Zwaxthale announced, setting his briefcase on the counter with what he hoped was authoritative confidence. "Did you complete forms 12A through 37C first?" "Yes." "Environmental Impact Assessment, filed in triplicate. Cultural Sensitivity Certification, notarized by the High Council of Appropriate Interactions." Click's middle eyes narrowed. "Ah, but did you submit the amended Cultural Sensitivity Certification? The one that accounts for subsection 15.7.2b regarding potential exposure to species with fewer than 3 reproductive genders." Zwaxthale's mandibles clicked in frustration. There was an amendment? Oh yes. Posted on the bulletin board in Subdepartment 7 Alpha 3 rotation cycles ago, right next to the notice about the water cooler maintenance. Click gestured vaguely toward a wall covered in approximately 14,000 pieces of paper, organized according to a filing system that appeared to have been designed by committee. Specifically, a committee composed entirely of beings who had never seen paper before. 2 hours later, Zwaxthale sat in the waiting area designated for forms pending review, which occupied roughly the same square footage as a small moon. Around him, representatives from dozens of species occupied similar states of bureaucratic purgatory. A 7-foot-tall Crocthan warrior, whose people had perfected faster-than-light travel, stared at a clipboard with the defeated expression of someone whose entire worldview had been shattered by a request for his primary carapace identification number. The Thoraxian delegation had been there for 6 months, attempting to register their planet's new moon. Apparently, natural satellite acquisition required approval from the Department of Celestial Body Redistribution, but only after receiving clearance from the Ministry of Gravitational Impact Assessment, which was currently backed up due to a staff shortage caused by the ongoing interdepartmental dispute over coffee break scheduling. "This is ridiculous," muttered Captain Vreck of the Altarian fleet, his scales rippling with barely contained irritation. "My people destroyed the Omega Nebula in 3 days. 3 days. But I've been trying to file an asteroid mining permit for 8 months." "At least you have a number," sighed Dr. Yith, a researcher whose tentacles had taken on the droopy appearance of defeat. "I've been in the 'please wait to be assigned a number to wait for a number' line since last Tuesday." The general murmur of despair was interrupted by a sound none of them had heard in the registry before: laughter. Not the bitter, hysteria-tinged laughter of the bureaucratically broken, but actual, genuine amusement. "Excuse me," said a voice in heavily accented galactic standard. "Is this where we register as a space-faring species?" Every head in the waiting area turned toward the entrance, where 3 beings stood with the casual confidence of tourists who had somehow wandered into a war zone. They were bipedal, roughly humanoid, and carrying what appeared to be food containers. The first one, a female with yellow hair tied back in a practical knot, held a plastic container that smelled like something edible. The second, a male with darker skin and kind eyes, carried a thermos that was probably coffee, judging by the aromatic steam. The third, another female with auburn hair and laugh lines around her green eyes, had what looked like a bag of individually wrapped snacks. "You're human?" Registrar Click asked, her 6 eyes blinking in asynchronous confusion. "Guilty as charged," replied the blonde one, whose uniform bore the name tag Commander Sarah Chin. "I'm Commander Chin. This is Dr. Marcus Williams, and that's Engineer Lucy Kowalski. We're here to fill out whatever paperwork you need for humanity to join the galactic community." The waiting room fell silent. In 3,000 years of operation, no one had ever walked into the Grand Galactic Registry and used the phrase, "fill out whatever paperwork you need," with anything approaching cheerfulness. Do you understand what this entails?" Click's voice carried the tone of someone explaining terminal illness to a very optimistic patient. "Oh, sure," Engineer Kowalski said, unwrapping what appeared to be a chocolate bar. "Paperwork. We've done paperwork before. How hard can it be?" She offered half the chocolate to Dr. Williams, who accepted it gratefully. Zyaxthale leaned forward, his compound eyes widening. How hard can it be?" he repeated slowly, as if testing each word for explosive potential. "Well," Commander Chin said, pulling out a folding chair from somewhere. Where had she been hiding a folding chair? "We figured we'd start with the basics and work our way up. Dr. Williams here brought coffee for everyone, Lucy's got snacks, and I brought my grandmother's famous potato salad in case this takes a while." She gestured to the plastic container, which had somehow already attracted the attention of several alien species whose dietary requirements should have made human food completely irrelevant to them. Your grandmother's potato salad?" Registrar Click repeated. "Family recipe. Want some?" What followed could only be described as bureaucratic warfare, with humanity as the cheerfully oblivious invading force. "Right," Registrar Click said, pulling out a stack of papers roughly the height of a small building. "Let's start with the basic planetary registration forms. Please complete sections 1 through 847, making sure to fill out subsections A through ZZ in blue ink only, except for subsection M 7.2, which requires black ink, and subsection 19.6, which must be completed in the blood of your species' most senior religious leader." Commander Chen examined the forms with the same expression she might use while deciding between breakfast cereals. "Okay, couple of questions. First, what if we don't really have a most senior religious leader? We've got a lot of different religions, and they don't exactly have a ranking system." That's impossible," Click said. "Every species has a clear religious hierarchy." "Well, we've got a pope, but he's only in charge of Catholics. Then there's the Dalai Lama, but he's more of a spiritual guide than a ruler, and the chief rabbi, but again only for Jews. And then there are Muslims who have imams but no single leader, and Hindus who have gurus but— Stop! Click held up one hand while massaging her primary temple with another. "Just pick one. How about we use ketchup instead?" Engineer Kowalski suggested helpfully. It's red, it's plentiful, and technically it contains tomatoes, which are a fruit, so it's kind of natural. Dr. Williams nearly choked on his coffee. Lucy, you can't substitute ketchup for religious leader blood in official galactic documents. Why not? It's probably more sanitary. Zyaxthale watched this exchange with the fascination of someone witnessing a new form of physics. Are you treating the Grand Galactic Registry requirements as suggestions? Not suggestions, Commander Chen said, pulling out a pen and beginning to fill out forms with the fluid efficiency of someone who had clearly dealt with government paperwork before. More like starting points for negotiation. Negotiation. The word echoed through the waiting area like a profanity. Several alien species looked up from their own paperwork with expressions of horror and disbelief. You can't negotiate with the registry. Captain Vrek protested. It's an immutable, bureaucratic constant. The forms are sacred. The procedures are eternal. Are they, though? Commander Chen asked, not looking up from her writing. I mean, who actually wrote these rules? Silence. Seriously, she continued, someone had to sit down and decide that Form 23C needed to be filled out in blue ink specifically. Was there a committee? A vote? A really boring Tuesday afternoon where someone thought, you know what the galaxy needs? More arbitrary color restrictions on bureaucratic documents. Registrar Click's 6 eyes blinked rapidly. In 3,000 years, no one had ever asked who wrote the rules. The rules simply were, like gravity or the speed of light, or the universal constant of disappointment that accompanied any interaction with government agencies. The rules are. She began, then stopped. They've always been. Engineer Kowalski said, having liberated another chocolate bar from her seemingly infinite supply. But who maintains them? Who updates them? Because I'm looking at Section 247 here, and it references the great crystalline database of approved species designations. But then Section 248 talks about submitting information via quantum encrypted thought crystals. And Section 249 is just, I think it's a recipe for soup. Dr. Williams leaned over to look. That does look like soup. Minestrone, maybe. The point is, Commander Chen said, somehow having completed 17 forms while this conversation was happening. Systems like this evolve over time. Things get added, things get forgotten, and pretty soon you've got a bureaucratic monster that nobody really understands anymore. She stood up and walked over to the infamous bulletin board, where thousands of amendments, updates, and revisions fluttered in the artificial breeze from the climate control system. Look at this, she said, pointing to a notice buried beneath approximately 47 other papers. Amendment 7 for 23B. All forms regarding atmospheric composition must be submitted on blue paper. But then, right here, Amendment 8001C. Due to the blue paper shortage of 2,847, all atmospheric composition forms must be submitted on standard white paper until further notice. And then over here, Amendment 8002A. Blue paper shortage resolved. Please resume using blue paper for atmospheric composition forms. She turned back to the waiting room, where every alien was watching her with the horrified fascination typically reserved for natural disasters. But there's no Amendment 8002. Be canceling Amendment 8001C, she continued. So technically, you need to submit atmospheric composition forms on both blue paper and white paper, except when there's a shortage, unless the shortage has been resolved, in which case you need to use blue paper while still following the white paper protocol, because that amendment was never officially rescinded. Registrar Click made a sound like a computer attempting to process a logical paradox. So here's what I suggest, Commander Chen said, returning to her seat and pulling out what appeared to be a roll of duct tape. We simplify. You can't simplify the registry. Dr. Yith exclaimed, his tentacles writhing in distress. It's been 3,000 years of carefully balanced bureaucratic complexity. If you change one thing, the entire system could collapse. Promises, promises, Engineer Kowalski muttered, offering him a cookie. What happened next would be recorded in galactic history as either the greatest administrative revolution or the most catastrophic bureaucratic disaster, depending on who was writing the report. Commander Chen had somehow acquired a whiteboard. Where did she keep getting things? And was drawing what appeared to be a flowchart, if flowcharts could be designed by someone who fundamentally didn't care about conventional flowchart rules. Okay, she said, so the way I see it, you've got 3 basic types of request here. 1. I want to register something. 2. I want permission to do something. 3. I want to complain about something. She drew 3 boxes on the board. Everything else is just variations on these themes. But what about the subsections? ZYX Thale asked weakly. The cross-references? The interdepartmental approval matrices. What about them? The simple question hung in the air like a challenge to the fundamental nature of reality. Dr. Williams, who had been quietly observing the growing crowd of aliens gathering around their small group, cleared his throat. I think what Commander Chun is getting at is this. What's the actual purpose of all this paperwork? To ensure proper documentation. Registrar Click replied automatically. Documentation of what? Of compliance with regulations. Which regulations? The ones that require documentation. Engineer Kowalski looked up from the form she'd been reading. So, you need paperwork to prove you filled out paperwork to comply with rules that exist to make sure you fill out paperwork. That's how systems work, Captain Vreck said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it though? Commander Chen asked. She'd moved on to drawing what appeared to be a simplified organizational chart. Because where I come from, we tried that once. We created a department to oversee the department that was supposed to manage the department responsible for supervising the department that handled complaints about other departments. What happened? Dr. Yith asked, despite himself. It took them 6 months to schedule a meeting to discuss scheduling meetings. So we fired everyone and started over. The collective gasp from the assembled aliens could have powered a small spacecraft. You fired everyone. Registrar Click's voice was barely a whisper. Well, not everyone, Engineer Kowalski said reasonably. We kept the people who actually did useful work. Turned out there were about 6 of them. 6 people, Commander Chen continued, doing the work that 300 people had been pretending to do. Funny how that works out. She capped her marker and turned back to the room. So here's my proposal. Lucy, you're good with technical systems. Can you figure out what these forms are actually supposed to accomplish? Already on it, Kowalski replied, having somehow produced a tablet computer and what appeared to be a very long cable that she was connecting to various ports around the room. Give me 20 minutes, and I'll have a complete analysis of information flow, redundancies, and actual functional requirements. Marcus, can you work on the people side? Figure out who actually needs what information and why. Dr. Williams nodded, pulling out a notepad and approaching the nearest cluster of waiting aliens. Excuse me, but could you tell me what you're actually trying to accomplish here? Not what forms you're filling out, but what you want to happen when you're done. And I'll work on the process side, Commander Chen said, turning back to her whiteboard. Map out what a reasonable system might look like if it was designed by people who actually wanted it to work. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Grand Galactic Registry waiting room was filled with productive activity. This is madness, ZYX Thale muttered. But he found himself drifting over to where Dr. Williams was conducting what could only be described as impromptu therapy sessions for bureaucratically traumatized aliens. So you're saying, Dr. Williams was saying to a small, fuzzy creature whose species name translated roughly to perpetually anxious herbivores, that all you actually want is permission to start a small moon cheese export business? Yes, the creature squeaked, but first I need a business license, which requires a planetary commerce permit, which requires an interstellar trade authorization, which requires a species financial stability assessment, which requires... Okay, stop, Dr. Williams said gently. Who actually cares whether you sell moon cheese to other planets? The Department of Dairy Adjacent Product Distribution. And what do they care about? That the moon cheese is safe for consumption by carbon-based life forms? Right. So what if instead of 47 forms, you just got your moon cheese tested by a lab, got a certificate saying it's safe, and then registered your business with whoever handles interplanetary commerce? Skip all the middle steps. The creature's eyes widened. You can do that. Meanwhile, engineer Kowalski had somehow managed to interface her tablet with the registry's main computer system, despite the fact that the two technologies were separated by roughly 3,000 years of development and completely incompatible operating principles. Okay, this is interesting, she announced to the room. According to the system logs, about 60% of all forms get automatically approved without anyone actually reading them. Another 30% get rejected for trivial errors and then resubmitted with minor corrections, at which point they get automatically approved. The remaining 10% get shuffled between departments until everyone forgets about them or the applicant gives up. That can't be right, Registrar Click protested. Want to bet? Kowalski grinned and tapped her screen. According to your own system, there are currently 2,847 applications that have been under review for more than 5 years, including one from 2,891 standard years ago, which I think predates your species achieving spaceflight. She scrolled through more data. Oh, and here's a fun one. There are 17 different departments responsible for approving applications to start new departments. None of them have approved any new departments since the system was installed, but they keep referring applications to each other in an endless loop. Commander Chen looked up from her flowchart. So what you're telling me is that this entire system is basically an elaborate way to make people wait around until they either give up or die of old age? Pretty much, Kowalski confirmed. Although to be fair, it's a very sophisticated way to make people wait around until they give up or die of old age. There are backup systems, redundant waiting areas, and a whole department dedicated to optimizing the queue management for maximum despair. Well, that settles it, Commander Chen said, erasing her flowchart and starting over. We're not just simplifying the process. We're replacing it. The next few hours could only be described as organized chaos, if chaos could be organized by people who approach problems like they were particularly stubborn pieces of furniture that just needed the right combination of leverage and creative cursing to move. Right, Commander Chen announced, having somehow convinced Registrar Click to give her access to the main administrative terminal. Here's what we're going to do. Lucy, can you set up a simple database that tracks what people actually want and whether we've given it to them? Already done, Kowalski replied, not looking up from her tablet. I've got a basic workflow system running that categorizes requests into reasonable, needs clarification, and probably illegal, but entertainingly creative. What about the forms? ZYXThale asked. The blessed holy forms. What about them? Commander Chen pulled out a garbage bag from somewhere. Seriously, where is she hiding all this stuff? Lucy, can you print me a list of the actual information we need to collect for each type of request? Sure thing. A small printer materialized on the desk. Kowalski had apparently brought a portable office and began producing what appeared to be a single sheet of paper. There, Chen said, holding up the paper. Planetary registration. Name, location, dominant species, contact information, anything likely to explode or eat visitors. Done. Species registration. Name, biology basics, cultural notes, preferred pronouns, dietary restrictions for diplomatic dinners. Business permits. What are you selling? Is it dangerous? Where can we reach you if someone complains? Military stuff. What kind of weapons do you have? Please don't point them at anyone without warning us first. She looked around the room. What am I missing? The protocols, Dr. Yit said weakly. The proper procedures. The chain of authority. Marcus, who's actually in charge here? Chen asked. Dr. Williams looked up from his impromptu counseling session with a group of traders who had been trying to register their cargo hauling business for 18 months. Well, according to the organizational chart, ultimate authority rests with the Grand Administrator, but they've been in meeting for the past 6 years. Actual decisions get made by a committee of sub-administrators, but they can only meet when all 17 departments are represented, and Department 12 hasn't had any staff since the great filing cabinet shortage of 2851. So nobody's actually in charge? Pretty much. Perfect. Commander Chin turned to Registrar Click. Congratulations, you're in charge now. I can't be in charge. Click protested. I'm just a registrar. I process forms. I don't make decisions. Sure you do. You decide whether someone's paperwork is complete, right? Well, yes. And if you can decide whether paperwork meets requirements, you can decide what those requirements should be, right? That's not. The forms tell me what the requirements are. But who wrote the forms? Click opened her mouth, closed it, and made a sound like a dial-up modem having an existential crisis. Look, Engineer Kowalski said, offering Click a cup of coffee that smelled infinitely better than anything that had ever been available in the registry before. The way I see it, you've got two choices. Keep pretending this system makes sense and spend the rest of your life watching people fill out forms that nobody reads, or help us build something that actually works, and maybe go home before midnight for once. I haven't been home before midnight in 6 years, Click admitted. When's the last time you took a vacation? Dr. Williams asked gently. Vacation? What's vacation? The humans exchanged looks. Right, Commander Chin said. New rule. Nobody works more than 8 hours a day, everybody gets weekends off, and vacation time is mandatory, not optional. You can't just make rules. Captain Vreck protested. There are procedures for making rules. Committees, oversight boards, environmental impact studies. Watch me, Chin replied, writing on her whiteboard. Rule 1. If it takes longer to fill out the paperwork than it would to actually do the thing you're asking permission for, the paperwork is stupid. Rule 2. If you need to ask 5 different departments the same question, 4 of those departments are unnecessary. Rule 3. If nobody can explain why a rule exists, it doesn't exist anymore. She turned back to the room. Anybody have a problem with those rules? Silence. Good. Click, you're still in charge. Lucy, can you show her how to use the new system? Already on it, Kowalski said, having somehow set up what appeared to be a complete workstation next to Click's desk. See, this is way simpler. Someone comes in, tells you what they want, you check whether it's reasonable. And if it is, you give them a number and tell them to come back tomorrow. If it's not reasonable, you ask them to explain why they think it should be. And if they make a good argument, you give them a number and tell them to come back tomorrow. What if they don't make a good argument? Then you tell them no and suggest they try again when they've thought it through better. Click stared at the new system. But what if I make a mistake? Then you fix it, Commander Chin said. Mistakes aren't the end of the world. Having a system that's too afraid of mistakes to actually work, that's the end of the world. Word of the Great Registry Revolution spread through the galaxy with the kind of speed typically reserved for really good gossip and really bad news. Within hours, ships were arriving from across the sector, filled with beings who had heard the impossible rumor. Someone had figured out how to make the Galactic Registry actually work. Commander Chin was beginning to understand how her ancestors might have felt when they accidentally invented agriculture or the wheel, pleased with the immediate results, but slightly concerned about the long-term implications. Commander, Dr. Williams said, looking up from his tablet where he was tracking incoming ships, I'm showing approximately 47 vessels in the approach queue, with more jumping in every few minutes. What kind of ships? Mixed bag. Diplomatic vessels, cargo haulers, what looks like a tourism ship, and, 3 different news organizations. News organizations? Engineer Kowalski looked up from where she was explaining the new computer system to a small crowd of registry staff who had emerged from various departments like curious woodland creatures. Oh, yeah, this is probably going to be big news. Humans accidentally fix galactic government is definitely going to lead tomorrow's news feeds. We didn't fix galactic government, Commander Chin protested. We just streamlined one office building. Yeah, but this isn't just any office building, said a voice from the entrance. They turned to see a tall, elegantly dressed alien whose species Chin didn't recognize. Lots of flowing robes, multiple arms, and an expression that suggested either deep wisdom or chronic indigestion. I am Ambassador Curil of the Hegemonic Council, the newcomer announced. I have traveled here at considerable speed because I am told that impossible things are happening. Define impossible, Chin said, not looking up from the form she was reviewing for a small trading company that wanted to register a moon-based mining operation. Efficient bureaucracy. Oh, that. Yeah, turns out it's not that hard once you remember that the whole point is to help people, not make them suffer. Ambassador Curil's four eyes, two primary, two secondary, all equally bewildered, blinked in sequence. But suffering is an integral part of the bureaucratic process. It demonstrates commitment. It separates the truly deserving from the merely hopeful. Or, Dr. Williams suggested, it just makes everyone miserable for no good reason. You don't understand, Curil continued, moving closer to the desk where Registrar Click was efficiently processing applications with what could only be described as inappropriate levels of job satisfaction. The registry isn't just an administrative center. It's a symbol, a representation of the fundamental truth that all complex societies eventually collapse under their own bureaucratic weight. Sounds like a pretty depressing symbol, Engineer Kowalski observed, handing him a cookie. Want some coffee? Aye, that's not, you can't just. Curil took the cookie automatically, bit into it, and paused. This is actually quite good. Thanks. Secret is brown butter. So anyway, you were saying something about inevitable societal collapse. Curil chewed thoughtfully. The theory is that as civilizations become more complex, they require increasingly elaborate administrative systems to manage that complexity. Eventually, the administrative overhead becomes so great that more energy goes into maintaining the bureaucracy than into productive activities, leading to stagnation and decline. Makes sense, Commander Chin agreed. That's why you periodically have to tear down the bureaucracy and build a new one that actually works. But you can't just tear down the bureaucracy. It's the foundation of civilized society. Is it, though? Dr. Williams asked. I mean, what's the actual foundation of civilized society? People cooperating to solve problems, right? The bureaucracy is supposed to help with that. If it's not helping, what's the point? Ambassador Curil opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. Around him, the registry bustled with activity as beings who had been stuck in bureaucratic limbo for months or years suddenly found themselves making actual progress on their applications. The Crocton warrior, who had been trying to register his planet's new asteroid belt for 8 months, was now chatting pleasantly with Click about mining rights and orbital mechanics. The Thoraxian delegation had completed their moon registration and were discussing the possibility of opening a tourism bureau. The perpetually anxious herbivores had not only gotten their moon cheese business approved, but had also received helpful suggestions about marketing strategies from Engineer Kowalski, who apparently had strong opinions about cheese branding. This is chaos, Curil said weakly. This is productivity, Chun corrected. Chaos would be if we were helping people blow things up or start wars. We're just helping them fill out forms faster. But the forms are sacred. They represent 3,000 years of carefully balanced, 3,000 years of accumulated mistakes, Kowalski interrupted. Look, I ran an analysis. Your average form completion time was 847 standard hours, not counting waiting periods. The information actually collected could be gathered in about 20 minutes. That's not careful balance, that's just really bad system design. She pulled up a holographic display that showed the old system's workflow in all its bewildering complexity. See this? This is what your process looked like. 47 decision points, 32 different departments, and a routing system that looks like it was designed by someone who thought efficiency was a type of skin condition. The display shifted to show the new system, and this is what we replaced it with. 5 decision points, 3 departments, and routing that actually makes sense. You reduced 47 decision points to 5. Curel asked, staring at the display. Turns out most of them were asking the same question in slightly different ways, Dr. Williams explained. Like, are you planning to harm anyone, and will your activities pose a threat to galactic peace, and do you intend to engage in hostile actions? That's all the same question. So we just ask once, are you planning anything that might hurt people or break things? If the answer is yes, we talk about it. If the answer is no, we move on. What if they lie? What if they lie on 47 different forms? Chun countered. Liars are going to lie regardless of how much paperwork you give them. The difference is, now we can catch them faster and spend more time on the people who are actually trying to do the right thing. Ambassador Curel stood in silence for a long moment, watching the smooth operation of what had once been the galaxy's most notorious example of bureaucratic dysfunction. Finally, he turned back to the humans. This is either the most brilliant administrative revolution in galactic history, he said slowly, or the most catastrophic mistake we've ever made. Why not both? Engineer Kowalski asked cheerfully. By day 3 of what the news feeds were calling either the Great Registry Reform or the Administrative Apocalypse, depending on which news organization you asked, it had become clear that the humans had accidentally triggered something much larger than a simple efficiency improvement. Commander Chin stood at the window of what used to be the registry's executive conference room. It was now the break room, complete with comfortable furniture and a coffee machine that actually worked, watching a steady stream of ships arriving at the spaceport. The queue of vessels waiting for landing clearance stretched beyond the horizon. So, she said to Dr. Williams, who was reading reports on his tablet, how bad is it? Well, the good news is that we've processed more applications in the last 3 days than the registry typically handles in 6 months, he replied. The bad news is that word is spread, and now everyone in the galaxy wants to come here to file their paperwork. Everyone. Everyone. I'm showing delegations from 17 different galactic councils, 43 planetary governments, over 200 corporate entities, and what appears to be a religious pilgrimage from the Church of Blessed Forms, whose sacred doctrine apparently involves the ritualistic completion of bureaucratic documents. Engineer Kowalski looked up from where she was installing additional computer terminals. The really weird part is that half of them aren't even here to file paperwork. They just want to see how we made it work. I've had 12 different species ask me to come consult on their administrative systems. Please tell me you said no. I said I'd think about it. But honestly, how hard can it be? Most bureaucratic systems have the same basic problems. Too many steps, too many people, and nobody remembering why any of it exists in the first place. Commander Chun rubbed her temples. Lucy, we're explorers, not management consultants. Yeah, but think about it. If we can help other species streamline their governments, that's got to be good for galactic relations, right? Fewer frustrated administrators means less chance of interstellar conflicts over filing deadlines. She has a point, Dr. Williams added. I've been analyzing the data, and apparently about 15% of all galactic diplomatic incidents in the past century have been caused by administrative delays or bureaucratic misunderstandings. 15%. The trade war of 2823 started because the vegan confederation's export permit application got lost in the Altarian Commerce Ministry for 6 months. The neutral zone incident of 2847 was caused by a dispute over mining rights that could have been resolved in a day if anyone had known which department was actually responsible for asteroid claims. Commander Chin stared out at the growing crowd of ships. So you're telling me that we haven't just fixed one office building. We've accidentally provided a solution to a significant source of interstellar conflict? Pretty much. And now everyone wants us to fix their governments too. That's about the size of it. Chun was quiet for a long moment. You know, when we left Earth, the mission briefing mentioned the possibility of making first contact with alien civilizations. I don't remember anyone mentioning the possibility of accidentally revolutionizing galactic governance. It was probably in the appendix, Kowalski said. Those briefings are like 1,000 pages long. Who reads the appendix? Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Registrar Click entered, looking harried but oddly energetic. "Commander Chun," she said, "I need to."